Hello, everybody. We are really excited to be here today and to chat with you about, your ongoing questions and concerns surrounding the COBRA subsidy. So I'll begin by saying my name is Debbie Montella, and I'm Vice President of Account Management at the Graham Company under the Employee Benefits. So we have had many questions and concerns surrounding the compliance of the COBRA subsidy as it had been listed in the recent Appropriations Act. So with that, I'm going to turn over control and the presentation to Regan Debin, who is one of our compliance experts, and she'll lead the discussion on behalf of the Graham Company. So please feel free to, ask questions, whatever it may be. You can save them for the end if you would like, or if there's something immediate, feel free to jump in, and Regan will do the best that she can in the environment of, partial information that we've received from the government. So go ahead, Regan.
All right, thank you. And good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. We do have a slide deck that will take you through. Just a moment, I'll get this up. So hopefully you're all seeing that now. So we are focusing specifically on the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARP COBRA subsidy that that legislation was just passed in March. And then already this was supposed to have gone into effect in April, which is a pretty quick turnaround for the agencies to really digest that legislation and give us guidance and get this all going, which is part of the struggle for all of us, as we're all just trying to get our heads kind of wrapped around what this requires in a pretty short time frame. It is for just this 6-month period. We've got the time frame there, April through September 2021, and right now we're just kind of all in the midst, employers and their administrators, if you're using a COBRA administrator, just to get the right notices out and all that kind of thing to get this in place. So we're just going to go through at a high level. As Debbie said, feel free to interrupt me at any time, whether you want to chime in, just jump in and interrupt me, or if you want to type in a question too, we can do it that way as well. So this is just our team again here, Debbie and Mitch and I, that are kind of pulling this together for you today. And then just going ahead and jumping in, this is just really an overview, and then I'm going to dive into each of these pieces a little bit more. What this is it's a COBRA subsidy. A subsidy in that individuals who qualify are going to get this coverage with no cost to them. It'll be covered at 100%. For certain qualified beneficiaries, the legislation actually refers to them as assistance eligible individuals, or AEIs. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that term, because that's what we're seeing in the legislation and a lot of the guidance, versus a qualified beneficiary is what we often think of for COBRA. The subsidy, as I mentioned, is available for a very specific 6-month time frame. At most, today, it would be available to individuals April through September of this year. That's true unless Congress would take additional action. Nobody else really has the power to extend this further. If there was, for example, another relief bill passed later this year, certainly they could decide to extend this out further. But if Congress doesn't take action and agree upon that, this will end at the end of September. The subsidy would provide coverage for any group health plan that today is subject to continuation coverage. So it isn't just the medical plan. When you think of what plans get offered COBRA, it's much more broad: medical, dental, vision, even an HRA, EAP, on-site clinic, all of those different things. If the plan is providing any type of medical coverage, today is subject to continuation coverage requirements and would be available for this subsidized coverage. The legislation did specifically carve out health FSAs. So you get to take those off the list and don't worry about those. Most of how this will work, if you have a plan that is subject to federal COBRA, is that a lot of the burden is going to fall on the shoulders of the employer. They're notifying individuals, and then for those who meet the requirements and elect to take advantage of the subsidy, the employer is either paying the premium to the carrier, or if you're offering a self-insured plan, providing that coverage at no cost. But the good news is then you get to turn around and request a credit against your payroll taxes, the Medicare portion portion of your payroll taxes to get a refund for those premiums that are paid on behalf of these individuals. Our understanding today is that if you're not subject to federal COBRA, if you're a smaller employer, if you meet one of the exemptions, and maybe you're just subject to state continuation, that for state continuation, the carriers are likely going to handle that. But if your plans are subject to federal COBRA, it's the employer that is really responsible for taking care of this. And then, of course, there are notice requirements that go along with this. We have to have a way to let individuals know that they're even eligible for this and how to take advantage of that. And so we'll talk through those as well. We have at least gotten guidance from the DOL. We've gotten model notices and some FAQs on exactly what's required around these notices. So jumping in now kind of to a little bit more of the detail, again, the subsidy coverage is at 100%. So it's the full cost of COBRA, whether that's single or family level coverage. And it does appear to include the administrative fees. So a lot of times when you're charging for that COBRA premium, you're charging 102% rather than just 100% of that monthly premium cost. And it does appear, first of all, you have to cover that whole thing on behalf of individuals. You can't require them to pay even the administrative fee, but it does look like employers will then be able to claim a credit against not only the premium, but that administrative fee as well. As I mentioned, it does apply to all group health plan coverage, but not the health FSAs. And it is available to individuals whether they're being offered continuation coverage under federal COBRA or if it's state continuation. In both cases, this subsidy coverage is available. And then, as I mentioned, again, the employer payroll tax credit. For any of you that were taking advantage or I guess required to comply with the paid leave requirements under the legislation last year, the FFCRA, it was kind of a similar process where if you were providing that paid leave and required to cover your portion of the group health plan coverage while employees may be out for leave for a COVID-related reason, you were able to claim a payroll tax credit for that. We haven't gotten specific IRS guidance on exactly how this process is going to work and what type of documentation they might require, but we're assuming that they might just borrow from the structure that they put in place for that and have it work in a similar fashion. It's against the Medicare portion of your payroll tax credit. If for some reason the amount that you've paid out in COBRA premiums exceeds your payroll taxes due to a particular period, the IRS has promised that there will be a process to still apply for a refund to cover your full cost. Unfortunately, I don't have details on that yet as to exactly how it will work. We're waiting for the IRS to put out more guidance on that. We've been expecting it for a few weeks now, so I think we can expect that any day, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later, because I know a lot of employers have questions around exactly how that will work. So probably where we're taking the most questions on the COBRA subsidy today is employers just trying to understand who's actually eligible for this and who are they required to notify about this opportunity. They did narrow it. It's not anybody who's eligible for COBRA continuation or state continuation. It has to be a continuation right that was triggered either following the employee's reduction in hours or an employee's involuntary termination of employment. So normally, federal COBRA, when it triggers a loss of coverage, would also be available if they, for example, if a dependent aged out of the plan or lost dependent status, if there was a divorce, the death of employee, and for voluntary or involuntary termination of employment. So there's a much broader list of events that would potentially trigger a COBRA continuation right if they're covered when that qualifying event occurs. This COBRA subsidy, again, is only going to be available if a reduction in hours or involuntary termination of employment triggered that loss of coverage, and then they were offered COBRA following that event. It's not available for any of the other qualifying events, even if they were offered COBRA. It doesn't have to be specifically related to COVID-19. So it doesn't have to be that, hours were cut or, employees were placed on furlough because of COVID-19, or that there was a layoff due to COVID-19. It would be any reduction in hours or any involuntary termination of employment that triggered that continuation right. Now, within that category that we have to look at two different things. First of all, there would be those new qualifying beneficiaries, anybody who has a reduction in hours or involuntary termination of employment really now until the end of September. So they're brand new qualified beneficiaries who have lost coverage due to one of those two events between now and the end of September. When they're offered COBRA, just like they normally would be, they would have to get some additional information, understanding that, whenever that loss of coverage happened, from that point forward up and through the end of September, that they have the option to elect COBRA and not pay any premium toward that. Then, of course, after the end of September, if they wanted to continue COBRA continuation, they'd have to start paying premiums as normal. So that's kind of our first group, are those new qualified beneficiaries, if they have a qualifying event between now and the end of September when this goes away. But then the harder part of this is the existing qualified beneficiaries, those who had a reduction in hours or involuntary termination that occurred prior to April 1st, but they're still in their maximum coverage period. Those individuals as well, if they haven't exhausted that maximum coverage period, also have the opportunity to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy. And I do want to make sure that I clarify here, I've got it kind of in small print at the bottom of this slide. This is not just for the employees or former employees that trigger the continuation right. If at the time that they have a reduction in hours or involuntary termination of employment, their family members are covered as well, so spouses, dependents, maybe others are covered and trigger a COBRA continuation right, they would have an option to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy as well. So it's anybody who was covered at the time of the reduction in hours or involuntary termination of employment. Each of them have independent COBRA continuation rights. Any of them would have the opportunity to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy. And then diving down just a bit further into those existing qualified beneficiaries, those that are, it happened prior to April 1st, but they're still arguably in their maximum coverage period. Some of those individuals may have actually enrolled in COBRA or state continuation, and they've been paying their monthly COBRA premium. If that's the case, what's going to happen is then they'll be, notified just like everybody else, and they're already COBRA participants, and they just have to be informed that they could potentially stop paying those premiums if they meet the eligibility requirements up through the end of their maximum coverage period or September, whichever one comes first. The other group, though, is individuals who may not have elected when they first were offered COBRA. Maybe they chose to get coverage elsewhere or go without coverage, or maybe they enrolled for a few months, decided not to keep paying those premiums, and so it was discontinued at some point in time, but they're still within their maximum coverage period. They get a second chance to jump in as of April 1st. It doesn't mean that their coverage goes back retroactively, so they may end up having a gap in coverage. And the employer actually, the legislation is very clear that you cannot require those individuals to go back and make up those retroactive premiums. But they need to be given a second chance to jump in effective April 1st through, again, either the end of their maximum coverage period or September, whichever comes first, if they want to jump in and take advantage of this COBRA subsidy while it's available. And I should pause here when we're looking back and thinking about a maximum coverage period. If your plans are subject to federal COBRA, that's typically going to be 18 months, right? If you think of the amount of time that they're allowed to take advantage of COBRA continuation normally following a reduction in hours or involuntary termination of coverage, typically that's going to be 18 months for federal COBRA. So this is really going back as far as anybody who had a reduction in hours or involuntary termination of employment in October 2019. So over a year ago, and then going forward, if they had an event in October, their COBRA continuation right probably would have started November 1st, 2019, and then would go all the way up through April of this year. That would be their 18 months. So when we're trying to pull together a list as far as exactly which individuals need to be notified of this opportunity, we're potentially looking back that far to get that list together as far as people who may be able to take advantage of this. They're going to get a notice, and then they would have 60 days from being notified of this opportunity to elect and say that they meet the eligibility requirements and want to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy. And again, it's not going to go back. There may be that gap in coverage. It would start April 1st and then run up through the end of their maximum coverage period or through the end of September. So I'm going to just pause here for a moment to let you digest that. I do have a couple examples here of each of those scenarios for somebody who's a new qualified beneficiary. That's kind of example one. The example two is somebody who is an existing qualified beneficiary and they actually did choose to elect COBRA and have been paying the premiums. And then the third example would be that second chance individual that they, again, had a qualifying event prior to April, chose not to elect COBRA, but then still have this opportunity to jump in April 1st if that coverage option makes sense for them, themselves, or their family members. And as you're kind of taking a look at those, I am going to change gears, and move away from kind of those eligible for this COBRA subsidy and jump to the next topic. If anybody has anything that you'd like me to address before we move into that, go ahead and chime in. All right. So this COBRA subsidy period, this time frame, I've been kind of mentioning as I talked through the eligible individuals, it's this 6-month time frame, but there are two reasons why an individual might take advantage of this and then lose it sooner. The first one there is that in order to be an eligible individual, not only do they have to have this continuation right following a reduction in hours or an involuntary termination of employment, they also cannot be eligible for another group health plan, whether that's through another employer, might be through a spouse's or a parent's employer, or perhaps they were laid off or furloughed and now they're back on the job and they're eligible again. If they are eligible for another group health plan or Medicare, they have to kind of waive. They don't have a right to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy. So even if they elected and that's not the case starting April 1st, and then during this time frame they become eligible for another group health plan, they'd have to notify you and let you know that that's the case. If they fail to do that, there is actually a penalty. This is not the employer's responsibility to track this. This is on the individual who's electing to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy. If they fail to notify the plan that they've become eligible for other coverage, it's $250 for failure to notify. If the IRS determines that it was intentional, they can require them to repay the full premium amounts for whatever coverage they received. But then on the flip side, and this would all be worked out just with the IRS, it could also be forgiven if it was for reasonable cause, and that would just be for the individual to work out with the IRS ultimately. Again, this is not something that the employer has to track. It's just, the individuals will have to make sure that they're letting the plan know and that they're remaining eligible for this. The other way that it might end sooner is, again, if they come to the end of their maximum coverage period. If their original qualifying event was way back late in 2019 or early 2020, they might be coming to the end of their 18-month maximum coverage period during this time frame. This does not give them any extension on this maximum coverage period. Whenever their COBRA would have normally ended, their COBRA ends, this subsidy goes away. So if that happens prior to September, this COBRA subsidy would no longer be available. And then no matter what, once they get to the end of September, again, unless Congress takes action and extends this, this COBRA subsidy is going to go away for everybody at the end of September. I should also clarify for that group health plan eligibility, they did clarify that that's going to be specifically another group medical plan. If they're only eligible for a accepted benefit, which would be, a dental only or vision only or health FSA, if it's not a group medical plan that they're eligible for, they would be able to still take advantage of the COBRA subsidy. So when we're asking individuals or explaining to them about this, it really should be group medical plan coverage or Medicare. So then the other question we get is, what about this outbreak period or this extension of time that individuals have to elect COBRA? And this has nothing to do with the most recent legislation. This is actually tied to the national emergency that was declared in March of last year by President Trump. What happened following the issuance of that national emergency is the IRS and the DOL jumped in. They have the authority to give up to a 1-year extension on normal deadlines that apply under ERISA and COBRA. So where that comes into play here with COBRA specifically and interacts with this is that individuals normally have 60 days to elect COBRA. If that deadline happened for them sometime after March of 2020 when the national emergency was declared, they have to be given up to an extra year from whatever their original deadline was to elect COBRA. Now, under these rules, it would go back retroactively. They chose to take advantage of this back to their original coverage loss date, so there wouldn't be a gap in coverage, but they also have to make up those premiums retroactively. They'd have to pay the 102% for all months that they missed. We haven't heard of a lot of individuals taking advantage of this over the last year or so, but this is still in effect. We are still in that national emergency, so even individuals today who newly trigger a COBRA continuation right do technically have up to an additional year to elect COBRA retroactively and be asked to pay the premiums. So where these two things intersect, and this is actually part of what the DOL included in their model notices, is that some individuals may be able to take advantage of both of these things if they ultimately find themselves in a situation where they need this coverage, not just starting April 1st, but even retroactively. They could take advantage of this additional window to elect their coverage retroactively back to their original loss of coverage date, make up the premiums all the way through March of this year, whatever those are, and you're under no obligation to add that coverage back in until they actually make up those premiums. And then they could also choose to continue that and take advantage of the COBRA subsidy beginning April 1st up through whenever their maximum coverage period runs out or through September. And so that's what these timelines are showing here, is the interaction of those two things. Again, the employer can't require the employee or other individuals to elect retroactively and make up those premiums. That's completely up to them, but they may have the option to do that. And then either way, if they are meeting the requirements for the COBRA subsidy, they'd be able to jump in April 1st and get that COBRA subsidy to cover the cost completely for them. So now we're going to talk just a bit about the actual notice requirements. We did get several model notices from the DOL. I think there were 5 or 6 model notices that they provided. So for employers specifically, subject to federal COBRA, these are the ones that you need to worry about. We've broken these up into the categories of new qualified beneficiaries versus the existing qualified beneficiaries. So those new qualified beneficiaries that trigger their qualifying event between now and the end of September, they would have already been sent an election notice. So this isn't an additional requirement to send a different notice, but what they want you to do is replace your normal election notice with this modified election notice, or you can supplement your existing notice to have this information around the COBRA subsidy. And along with that modified election notice, you should include this summary of COBRA premium assistance provisions. We're going to talk about that more in just a moment, but the election notice has kind of broad language around how to elect COBRA, whether it's with or without the subsidy, because some of these individuals are going to have maybe a period of time where they're eligible for the subsidy and a period of time where they're not, so they're getting all of that information. But the summary of COBRA premium assistance provision specifically focuses on exactly how someone can be eligible for this COBRA subsidy, and even includes a certification or attestation form on pages 2 through 4 of it, where the individual has to go through and say, yes, my continuation right was triggered by either a reduction in hours or an involuntary termination of employment. No, I'm not eligible for any other group medical coverage. No, I'm not eligible for Medicare. They have to go through and actually certify that they meet those requirements. And that way you can be really sure when individuals send in their election forms and are saying they want to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy, that they truly are eligible for that. So 2 pieces that would go to these new qualified beneficiaries: this modified election notice, and then that summary of COBRA premium assistance provisions. For existing qualified beneficiaries, they're going to get this model notice that's called an extended election period. So for those individuals who are currently COBRA participants and paying their premiums, as well as those individuals who maybe they're not currently COBRA participants, but they're still within their maximum coverage period and they get this second chance to jump in and take advantage of this, they're getting notified with this extended election period notice that should also be accompanied by that same summary of COBRA premium assistance provisions that's going to explain to them exactly who qualifies and then ask them to certify that they really do meet those requirements. That first one, that for new qualified beneficiaries, that's going to go within the same time frame that we normally send election notices out. For the existing qualified beneficiaries, there's a hard deadline for employers, and we're just coming up on a month from that. You need to make sure that that list of individuals that triggered a COBRA continuation right, likely any time within 18 months of April of this year, that they get this notice by the end of May. And remember that they get 60 days to make the election from whenever they receive this notice. So really, now that we've got this model notice available for you to pattern your notice after, the sooner that you can get that out, the sooner that 60-day clock starts ticking, so that we aren't halfway through this COBRA subsidy premium before you're even kind of figuring out who's going to elect and take advantage of this back to April 1st. Then the final new notice requirement is only for those individuals who actually elect this COBRA subsidy. If they're participating, they send back their election forms, their certification. You are providing the COBRA subsidy at no cost for these individuals, April through September. If that subsidy comes to the end, either because they reach the end of their maximum coverage period or they get to the end of September, you're required to send them a notice 15 to 45 days prior to that subsidy ending, just letting them know that that subsidy is coming to an end and that they would have to start paying the COBRA premiums themselves, or that they would need to start considering other coverage options. And similar to our other COBRA model notices, there's information about whether if they're eligible for marketplace coverage and perhaps subsidies there, or other group health plan coverage, just helping give them a way to start exploring other coverage options once that subsidy is coming to an end. As far as the attestation or certification that I was just talking through before that will go out with those notices for individuals when they're electing, there isn't anything in the legislation or the DOL rules that clearly say that you're required to collect these. The DOL instructions do indicate that the summary of COBRA premium assistance provision should be sent out with the model notice. But we're strongly recommending that employers do actually collect this as part of their election process for individuals who come back and say that they want to take advantage of this COBRA subsidy. And for three different reasons. First of all, we have tons of employers that are asking, how would we know? We have no idea if these individuals are now eligible for another group medical plan or if they're eligible for Medicare, especially if they're no longer our employee. So this is going to provide that proof so that you know as an employer that you're only providing this COBRA subsidy to individuals who are considered AEIs and meet this requirement. If they're signing off on that, that's really the best that you can do, taking them at their word. It's also going to ensure that you don't have any issues with your carrier or stop-loss vendor providing the coverage. When you're asking them to let people jump on the plan effective April 1st with, perhaps following a gap in coverage, this is just going to make sure that, you're telling them that you're only providing that coverage as required under this legislation and that you're only providing it to, again, those assistance eligible individuals. And then finally, I mentioned before that we don't have any specific guidance from the IRS, but our expectation is that they'll probably come out with something that says as long as you have some proof of premiums paid to the carrier or coverage provided under your self-funded plan and the cost of that. And then if you have this proof of eligibility, that this attestation or certification form from the individuals who elected the COBRA, that's going to go a long way to prove that you are eligible to take advantage of that payroll tax credit if the IRS is auditing things and asking you to provide that. And so I have just a couple excerpts from this summary of COBRA premium assistance provisions here. You can see that this, in a much more clear way than the model election notice on the first page on the left, makes it very clear in bullets exactly what requirements the individual has to meet to be eligible for this COBRA subsidy. And then on the right, I appreciate it's really tiny, but I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of that certification form. You can see in the middle of it, those 5 questions that the individual would have to be able to check yes for all of those statements. And then if they're sending that back into you, you can be pretty sure, again, that you are only providing this COBRA subsidy as required. You can get access to all of these model notices. I apologize, I didn't provide a link as part of this, this presentation. If you need it, certainly follow up with us. But if you just Google the DOL COBRA subsidy, if you type that in, it will very quickly pull you up to the DOL's page. They have a home page specifically tied to this COBRA subsidy where you can find all of these model notices as well as FAQs that more so are geared toward individuals who might be eligible for this, but there is a bit of information for employers there as well, and information about where to contact them if you've got questions or need help. So again, if you just Google DOL COBRA subsidy, you should get access to all of the model notices and some additional information. And I expect that they're going to continue to update that page as we go through this process. And then final thing I wanted to touch on here, because we understand that so many of you are coordinating your COBRA administration with a vendor. Certainly there are some employers who handle their own COBRA administration, and then obviously the notices as well as providing the coverage and requesting the payroll tax credit is going to be completely on your shoulders if you're subject to federal COBRA. But if you're coordinating with a COBRA administrator, it's very likely that they're going to help with some or most of this process. And so what we're encouraging is for you to be having conversations with your vendor. These are some of the questions that we would suggest that you're asking. What are they doing around these notices? Are they going to take these model notices and help customize them for you and help send those out? Is it something that they're going to make available, but maybe they expect then that you're printing and distributing? So just figuring that out with your vendor, the notices piece first. And obviously, some of them have been tracking very closely what the qualifying event is for you. They may be asking for that information when you're entering in a new COBRA eligible individual. Some may not, and so they may not have the records to be able to help you determine an involuntary termination of employment or reduction in hours versus some of the other qualifying events. So again, coordinating with them to figure out what information they have or what information they may need from you to help do this. It would be good to know kind of how they're going to handle the election process for those who do take advantage of this, as well as helping with sending out that notice within 15 to 45 days for those who do elect when their subsidized coverage is coming to an end. And then finally, I think it's unlikely that your administrators are going to actually help you with the payroll tax credit that you're eligible for, but hopefully they can help track those individuals who actually elect this subsidized coverage and do reports of some kind for you, both helping to track so that you've got documentation as well as just tracking, how many individuals and what amount you should be requesting for that payroll tax credit. So with that, I know that's probably an overwhelming amount of information. If you have questions, you may still be kind of digesting some of this. I appreciate that you may be getting some of this information, whether it's from your COBRA administrator or other webinars and things that you've been attending. But let me know how I can help. Know that we are expecting a substantial amount of additional guidance from the IRS. Yesterday would be good for that because we do have a bunch of unanswered questions yet. But at this point, really your biggest thing that you need to make sure is in the works is that you are pulling together that list of assistance eligible individuals and making sure that those notices are being prepared, that you can make sure they're, whether it's a new qualified beneficiary, that they're getting the right information with the updated COBRA subsidy information, as well as existing qualified beneficiaries, that those notices are going out by May 31st at the very latest.
Thank you, Regan.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that presentation. Are there any questions, concerns, specific that we can answer right now? Otherwise, if you have anything, you can certainly send an email, and maybe Ivy, you would get those and distribute.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. If there aren't any questions, we can let our friends from the Graham Company hop off